Hey, welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. It's a great day today, and we have a good guest. We have Katy Hayes. Katy Hayes. Katy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for being
here.
Yeah. So what a wealth of experience. You know, oftentimes in this class, we'll talk about sort of the well-oiled machines of development in Houston. You seem to have worked for all of them, right?
I've worked for a lot of them.
Right.
And, it's a nice way to say you have a lot of experience. You're not old.
No, but Museum of Fine Arts, the Symphony, and then Texas Children's, which is such a well-oiled machine, KIP, and then you worked at the Brown Foundation. I mean, you really have done a lot of, it's a wonderful career.
I love what I've gotten to do, and I'm honored to have been every place that I've been. And I started out at the Multiple Sclerosis Society, maybe less of a well-oiled machine, but something that was important to me, and kind of continuation of work that I did in college. And so I feel very, very fortunate, and I've learned all along the way, and I'm learning now in my new role as a consultant.
So now you're at Sterling, right,
yes.
and doing well there and enjoying it. When you think about every place that you've worked, Katy, and let's say you're writing a book, and we ask every guest this, if you're writing a book on development, what are some of the chapters for you based upon this rich experience?
I mean, lesson number one is that people give to people.
Yeah.
And so relationships are critical, and they're critical for you, but they're also critical for the people the boards and your CEO, and it's, I think, a development staff job to help make those relationships meaningful and to teach CEOs why those are important.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one chapter would be thank you, thank you, thank you. I think you just cannot thank people enough.
Yeah.
And
stewardship, right? Just a lot of stewardship.
Exactly. And just also keep up. See what new is happening and try to incorporate those. But really, the first chapter would be all about relationships.
Yeah. When you think about relationships and your work at the Brown Foundation most recently, and I know the Brown is sort of an interesting foundation, but when you think about the people that came to raise money from you, people who had a long-standing relationship with Brown and people who knew you really well, was it easier for them to get money? Or talk about how that relationship is important. Well,
if I were writing a book about foundation, especially family foundations, I would say it's their money. And so it's certainly, I felt like it was my job to represent the grantees and the prospective grantees. So I hope that it wasn't easier for people I knew to get in to see the Brown Foundation. But certainly my advice to them was, this is a family foundation, so you really need to appeal to family members, and you need to find out what they're interested in. And I can help so much, but along the way, but eventually it's going to have to be a relationship with a family member, and respecting what they're interested in and who they know. I mean, imagine if you were sitting at the table of a foundation that had the kind of assets that they do, how many difficult decisions you have to make. I have just a immense respect for how hard they had to work to give money away. I mean, who would have thunk it?
Right. Really. Talk a little bit about one of the interesting dynamics in the world of development, right, is the CEO and the Director of Development. I think if you're starting off in this area, you think, well, the CEO gets to run things and the Director of Development raises the money. But talk about sort of who do the foundations really want to have that relationship with? And I know it could be both, but talk a little bit more about that.
I think it's our role to make sure that a CEO understands his or her role, because it's critical in fundraising. And I don't know what a CEO's job description reads, but fundraising ought to be one of the top three things that a CEO does. But as a development professional, if you're asked to raise money and to always be asking people for money, that's hard. I mean, people are uncomfortable with that. So as a development professional, our job is to make it comfortable and easy. And that's just by being very clear on the mission, being very clear on what you're trying to raise for what. Just always having the information ready in a way that a CEO can communicate easily with donors. It's also teaching a CEO to listen, because oftentimes the development person isn't in the room.
Right.
I'd advocate for that at every chance that the development person be there. But if they're not, then a CEO needs to be prepared to listen, to hear what someone who is thinking of giving money really wants.
Yeah.
And that listening is a skill that sometimes when you're nervous and you're just trying to push your organization, it's sometimes difficult to kind of hear what's important to a prospective donor.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole listening thing is such an important part of that,
That's
right?
kind of hard in life.
Yeah.
If we solve that, we
Yeah.
can work on world peace.
Talk about your background. How did you end up doing development? I mean, you graduated in broadcast journalism from LSU,
Yes.
and you didn't go straight into TV journalism.
I did not. Although I'm sitting in a wonderful studio, I think I knew right away that it was more I loved broadcast journalism because you had to write in really crisp ways and you had to communicate quickly. So, but I didn't see myself interviewing or really having the, because I didn't want to be in people's business,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I didn't know that I had the anchor persona. So, but all that I learned about speaking, all that I learned about writing could really be adapted into fundraising. And
Wow.
I was the news director at WLSU, and I had done some public service announcements for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. So they asked me to do some fundraising for them while I was in college. So it was an easy transition to come to Houston and work for them.
And so was
as
that
my
your
first
first job right after college, was going straight to the Multiple
Yeah.
Sclerosis Society?
And back then, I mean, now they're known for their bike ride, which is
Right.
very cool. But when I was there, we were doing readathons in schools around in the 40-something counties that were part of our region. And so I traveled all over our part of the state and worked a lot in schools, worked with kids, and they raised money by reading books, which I thought was a smart thing for the MS Society to do to promote literacy. And so it was fun. A lot of travel back then, on the road a lot.
Yeah.
We didn't. The region was big, but not big enough to like hop on a plane and go
Yeah.
somewhere. It was always driving and everything. So that got old after a while.
When you think of your career, I don't think I've ever asked this question before, but when you think about your career, because you've worked at so many great places, was there one place that when you got that job, you thought, wow, this is my really big break?
Yes, Texas Children's.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are the Chief Development Officer at Texas Children's, which is the largest pediatric hospital in the country.
Yeah, what a wonderful place it is, isn't
And
it?
it's a place, I remember when we were doing a video for the hospital and the Chief Nursing Officer said, miracles happen here every day. And they
Wow.
do.
Yeah.
It was an extraordinary responsibility and just, I think one of the things I valued most too was the professional sharing among other chief development officers of children's teaching hospitals. I learned more from that group of people, and we weren't competitive in the sense because, if you're raising money for Texas Children's, what they're doing in Chicago can be helpful, but is probably not going to affect what they do in Chicago. So that professional relationship, I mean, some of those people are my closest friends and advisors today. And although Texas Children's was maybe the place, the mission of KIP was and continues to be, even in a troubled time there, just an extraordinary experience. And at the hospital, we worked really hard not to use children to raise money. I mean, we had to be very careful.
Yep.
These are sick kids and families under a lot of pressure. At KIP, our children's stories and their families.
And they wanted to be part of that,
yes,
right?
and we got to know them. And so some of those, my professional colleagues at Texas Children's, but the kids, the KIPsters at KIP are lifelong friends and success
And why that
stories.
move, Katy, when you're going from Texas Children's, which arguably maybe the best fundraising group in town, to going to KIP, which was, in a sense, a startup, right?
Yep.
You know?
A couple of reasons, and one of them is because I believe that I knew what needed to happen at Texas Children's before we started the next campaign, and I I was not convincing the CEO that we needed more people and more specialized people. And he is a remarkable CEO, still there many years later.
Wallace,
so Mark stayed and I left. But it became apparent to me that on my watch, the growth that needed to happen for raising $1 billion instead of millions, I was going to have a hard time convincing Mark. And so, you know, I actually
Sometimes
think
it takes
about
the
that.
next guy to convince, because
Yeah,
it happens,
and it was
right?
the next guy, you know, and John Scales,
exactly.
pretty amazing. And I've thought a lot about, now, why wasn't I able to do that? And I think there were a lot of things. Fundraising at Texas Children's actually was pretty new because we had separated from St. Luke's. And I think that it was just new and different for the hospital. So while we raised a lot of money, it was still kind of over here. And so that happened. But then Kip, so I left the hospital and actually intended to take a little time. But Kip came calling, and truly I thought, really? I've been head of development at Texas Children's Hospital. Why would I go to Kip? But I went to the campus and thought, this is my next dream job. And when you work in a teaching hospital, everything is about bureaucracy and going up the ladder to get permission to do anything. At Kip, no,
It's like a
bureaucracy.
free-for-all, huh? Yeah.
And
in the best sense of the word, right?
yes, and Mike Feinberg used to say, you know, just do it. Just if we fail, we fail, but just do it.
And you had some extraordinary success there, didn't you?
Yeah, we had remarkable success. And again, although I know it's a dark time for him and for Kip, he was the catalyst for a lot of that fundraising, and he took instruction. You know, he just was very, how do I do this? What do I do? How? And he listened, and he was an incredible spokesperson for.
Talk about building that board at KIPP, because you had been at Texas Children's, a very prominent board, right? One of the best boards in town. And then you go to KIPP, and you really have to build what turned out to be a very good board. Talk about that.
Well, again, I think that I was there in a sweet spot for education, which it still should be in our city. A lot of business leaders, a lot of education leaders were understanding that education, for all of us to thrive in this city, we need a better educated workforce, and it's just the right thing to do. So I think people were looking for the next catalyst to make things change in education, and KIPP was it. So, but also Mike was not, and we weren't afraid to ask anybody, come on, join us. And when you're in a startup, you can, at Texas Children's, the board is extraordinary. But to get them to do kind of new and different things, well, this has been working for a long time. At KIPP, if you said, I'm going to give you 5 names, call them, get them out here, they were like, well, okay, let's do it. You know, it was just a much more entrepreneurial, everybody wanted to contribute to its success. So, and it became a popular board to be on. If you were on the KIPP board, then you were part of something that was really making a difference in education.
And that's it's easier to recruit when it's
absolutely.
in board, right?
And people who maybe hadn't served on some boards before, but were real up-and-comers in that. I mean, the John Arnolds of the world, and you know, people like that who knew they wanted to make a difference, and this was a way they could do it.
When you think about the landscape of fundraising in our city, you know, who are some of the shops that maybe are undersung, but that you know that, wow, they are doing some really nice work development-wise?
You know, I mean, as a consultant now, I get to see all kinds of shops, and one of the most well-oiled machines is the Houston Zoo. I mean, they just do a really nice job. They did a really nice job of building their board before they launched a big campaign. They do a great job of stewarding their donors. Of course, you know, who didn't want to it's
Right.
easy to steward people when you've got the zoo
The zoo,
animals to
yeah.
be your
Yeah.
ambassadors. But they've done a great job of teaching people about conservation.
Yeah.
And that, so it's not just that you go to visit the animals in the zoo. What you do at the zoo is helping animals around the world. So it's a really fun campaign to watch, and a really good team of people.
And they have great leadership right now that
Yeah.
has sort of the supervision of where we should be going, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the Kips and the Yeses of the world also are doing a really, really good job, and they're trying to raise millions and millions of dollars, and I think they've done a nice job of, keeping donors, communicating with them, attracting more donors, and really understanding why those private dollars are needed in a public education setting. I think they've done so those. But I've watched young audiences raise more money.
yeah.
I've watched you raise money.
Yeah,
I've watched their Workshop Houston. I mean, there are all of
Yeah,
these
it's a good little
small
group, isn't it? Yeah.
groups that are making a difference in our city, that have some really good people. Cristo Rey.
Wow,
I've watched, and Bea was on my team at Texas Children's, so it's been fun to watch the people that I worked with kind of get out there. Ann Murphy just left Deanie to go to
Right.
Planned Parenthood.
Right.
She is going to do an incredible
yeah.
job, and that has been. They've had room for growth in fundraising
Right.
at Planned Parenthood.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's always, do you, Katie? I mean, I do this, and I've talked to Brian Green about this as well.
And that's another.
That's another great
yeah.
one, right? But I always sometimes will see organizations, and I think, what a great mission. That they're sort of underperforming a little bit. They could be doing better. Do you see that sometimes too?
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. I think that people, for one thing, I think it's leadership and it's board reluctance to. How many people have you asked to be on your board that have said, "I will help you, but I won't raise money"? But that's why it gets back to relationships.
We always say no to that. Then.
Yes, well, then go away. If people believe in the mission of an organization and they have real, true relationships, then it ought to be just a natural thing to say, "I'm supporting this. I hope you'll support it too." It also ought to be okay to hear, "No, I have my own interests, and you go for it. But this is where I'm focusing," and not take that personally.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of good things to get to in this city, and
But it is interesting that just that ask and just the visit. I find way more often than not, people will often agree to sit down and talk to you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, isn't it a little bit flattering to be asked? I mean,
Right.
I think if you're approaching someone, it says, "We respect you. We know that you've given in other areas, or we know that you have the potential to give and make a difference." I mean, who doesn't want to accomplish those things? And, there's some people that want their names on big old buildings and signs. There are some people that just want to feel good internally, and there's room for everybody.
Yeah.
So
People just want to help, though, in many
Yeah,
ways.
absolutely,
and I find very
especially
few of
in
those.
this city.
You sometimes hear about, people want their names, but I don't see that very much. I mean, they're happy to get their name but they
Sure.
really just want to help,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I think that when you're asking, you're giving somebody an opportunity to make our world a better place.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the Twitterverse to see
Oh,
what people are
yay.
tweeting in.
Okay.
So LaTanya Julian has a good first question. When you look at all the organizations that you've worked with, where was the biggest growth for you? Which one really helped you to grow and really learn a lot?
Gosh, I learned something. I don't mean that to be a cop out, but I learned something at every place.
Yeah.
At Texas Children's, apparently, when you become a manager, you don't just automatically become a good one. And
That's true, right?
I am proudest of the team that we got to put together at Texas Children's, and some are still at the hospital. I'm very proud of that. But others are leading fundraising programs around the city, and that's because they were that good. And Delphia Duckins is leading fundraising at the Smithsonian. So pretty good. She did fine
Yeah.
for herself. But so just understanding that. At KIP, I just learned the value of entrepreneurship and thinking on your feet and being creative. And at the Brown Foundation, I really developed a deep and abiding respect for how hard it is to make a decision about giving money away. So I just feel like I've learned. And at Sterling, I'm learning, just to hone in on the important stuff.
Yeah,
So,
which is very important.
yeah.
That's good for a consultant.
Yeah.
Too many consultants don't do that quickly enough, right? Latrice wants to know, when you joined KIP, what was the biggest challenge for you?
For me, the biggest challenge was understanding where our kids came from. I mean, if you look at me, I grew up in a solidly middle-class family. My mom didn't go to college, but my father, had a master's degree, and it never one time occurred to my sister and me that we would not go to college.
Yeah.
Nor did it occur to us that we might be hungry.
Yeah.
Nor did it occur to us that we might live in a place that wasn't safe. So understanding the work that you do,
Yeah.
that our kids, it wasn't just that we could have great teachers and that we could have great experiences for them, but understanding how we needed to meet our kids where they were and how we needed to take care of a lot of other things before we could say, and here's American history, or
Yeah.
here's math, let's go for it. They had issues I didn't even know. So.
Wow. Leslie Azalia wants to know, how important is it having the right people on the board?
Huge. Next question. Yeah. I mean, that without, you get to a level or a place, either with a big organization or a small one, where you are comfortable asking for money yourself.
Yeah.
But Katy Hayes asking for money is a whole lot less powerful than you or than, John or Laura Arnold and so and your board also just drives the efficacy of your organization. So I just think it's critical, and a lot of time needs to be spent on putting together a board. I'm working with a kind of startup group right now at Sterling, and they have a few really good people on their board, but those people have asked everyone they know for money, and most of them are heads of other organizations. So that board building, I feel like we need to pause a little bit before we focus on fundraising, because they need board building and then fundraising.
Yeah.
You just don't always have that luxury.
And speaking of luxury, one of the luxuries is having those board members, and it's usually some old guy who just knows a lot of people, and he's not even diplomatic in his asks.
Yeah.
He just knows you, and he's like, Katy, I want you to give $100,000.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of those, but it's
No.
really nice when you have those as
And
well.
those people, I mean, I've just been reading a lot about diversity on boards, and it's critical in our world. I mean, we have to make this different. But those old guys, or sometimes women,
that's
they're
right.
the ones who can teach the rest of us how to make those asks and things. So the diversity kind of goes both ways.
Yeah,
I mean, you
absolutely.
need people who have asked for money, have given money, and we live in a city of 4 million people. There are more people than the names that we all know
Absolutely.
who can be powerful board members. And it's also training your board. You're asking them for help, but they need to know that part of their role is giving and part of their role is getting. That's if they don't want to do that, there's something else they can do in this world.
Absolutely. Afshan Malik wants to know, when you're selecting people for a board, what are some of the decisive things that you're looking for?
I want to know that they know about the work that my organization is doing, or they've demonstrated an interest in learning about that. I want to know that they are a connector. It may be a connector to people who can give big money, or it may be a connector to groups of people that we need to know that we don't know. I need to know that they're willing to give money. Now, different boards are different. I mean, if you're on the Texas Children's Board, it's probably pretty big money.
Yeah.
KIP has now gotten to that point. But if you're on Workshop Houston's board, it may not be that you give a whole big bunch of money, but you have to, every member of the board has to be willing to give. So I'm looking for connectors, people who, and I'm looking for someone who will do what we ask them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. So a couple of questions that. So how about Milton Guardado wants to know, along the way in your career, any unexpected challenges that you had to face, and how did you respond?
Yes and yes. At Texas Children's, when I got there, as I said, I mean, it has an incredible reputation, but it was not, fundraising was very low on the priority list, and most of the fundraising had been handled through St. Luke's Hospital. I had an incredible team, very small, everybody doing what they were asked to do, but we needed to change that. So the John Scales of the world, who was at Baylor, the Pat Mulveys at MD Anderson, I went to everybody and said, tell me about how you structure your team. And then we restructured, and that was hard because it meant that people were asked to do different things that they might not have the skill set. It was sort of determined not to lose anybody unless they wanted to go. As it turned out, there was a great deal of turnover, but I'm really proud of those. I'm in touch with almost all of those people because they got to go on and do things where their skills match the needs. So just having the right people on your team and being able to make some kind of hard decisions when that happened. The Brown Foundation, I thought I was perfect for them. I had worked in the arts, one of their areas of priority.
You were perfect for the Brown Foundation.
Thank you. I had worked in education. I just felt, oh my gosh, this is a perfect culmination. What I've failed to take into account right away is that, I might or might not have any influence with the family members because they'd been at this for a while. I think the board there now is changing quite a bit, and a younger crew will come in that maybe ask more questions. But it was really hard to feel that I had this incredible opportunity to learn so much, and that what I learned might or not be valued in their decision making. That's hard because it's a little bit about your eagerness to help. It's probably a lot about your own ego. And it is, it's harder to give money away than you think. And at KIP, I was so happy to leave the bureaucracy of Texas Children's, not Texas Children's, but at KIP, about day 3, I thought, man, we could use a little structure here because this is all over the map, and we need to. I had one person that worked with me, and the first day I arrived at the office, she was doing teacher background checks, and I thought, now, this relates to fundraising. How? And at KIP, you're all teachers, you're all hands on deck, but at some point, everybody needs to do what they do best, and teacher background checks wasn't our best thing. So kind of learned everywhere.
Very good. Tanya Castellano wants to know, given your experience in development and fundraising, and it seems like a lot of fundraising professionals have a favorite area of development. Do you have a favorite? Is it events? Is it individual giving? What was your favorite throughout your career?
Let me just be clear, it is not events, ever. I've worked at places where we've produced really successful, fun, and made a lot of money in events, but I like the individual giving, and
that's the relationship building, really, right?
Yeah, because to me, the people that I've gotten to meet along the way, some of whom who have become friends, and others are just people I respect. I got to sit on the floor at KIP with Bill Gates. How else are you gonna? That ain't gonna happen in my day-to-day life. But I've also worked with just everyday people. One of our most consistent donors at Texas Children's gave just a little bit of money every month. When we called him to thank him because he was so regular, he had no children. he just wanted to help children. And, to kind of get to know him and his motivation, and then to be sort of a part of the end of his life was a privilege. It's just, there's some pretty cool stuff when you really get to meet people and teach them about what you're doing and why their giving can make a difference, even if it's $25 a month opposed to 25 million.
Yeah.
So.
And that whole idea of individual giving, I wonder if there's not enough focus in the development world on that, right?
Fundraising 101, you've got a lot of corporations, you've got foundations that are in the business of giving, but there's so many more people, so many more individuals, and if you're able to focus your attention, but it's hard because you can look up a corporation and see what they do. A foundation's there to give money away, so it's logical, but to sort of figure out who your individuals are, who your best prospects might be, and how to attract them to your organization. That's why your board, your CEO, all of the other people. And a KIP teacher can tell more about KIP than anybody.
Yeah.
So just
a happy KIP teacher.
Yeah. Well, there is that, or an unhappy KIP teacher, and why they're unhappy because KIP can't provide for them what they need, the support that they need.
So Jocelyn Gariba wants to know, talk about some of the differences of being a consultant as opposed to previously when you were sort of a fundraiser.
Yeah. Well, I can go home at night.
Yeah.
I like that, although some of my colleagues do not. I like the strategy. So as much as I like the dealing with individual donors, at this stage of my career, it's really interesting to put together everything that I've gotten to learn along the way and to try to help pull that from clients. And I work pretty late at Sterling too, but there's a sense of I can guide, I can contribute, I can spark an idea, but at the end of the day, what I need to do is give them the tools, and they're going to do the hard work of raising this money. So I just think it's different, and I like that. I was actually on one of my clients is KIP, and one of our clients is KIP, and I was on a phone call with them today. We had kind of brilliant idea for something that they can do, and it was just so much fun, but it came from them through a guided conversation, and that's pretty cool to watch the seeds of what kind of take root in their good work.
What do you do when you're part of an organization that's prominent, much like KIP, and you have some sort of scandal that happens? I mean, it's happened with the United Way, it's happened with the American Red Cross, but as a development person, this can be devastating, right?
Yep.
I mean, I have no doubt that KIP is going to be able to climb out of this, but it doesn't mean it's not hurting right now.
No. I think it comes down to how you've stewarded your relationships with your donors, with the people, with your partners in the community, not just your donors, but the people who are in the trenches with you, like you, again. And it is, if you have crafted your mission around one person, that's guaranteed to fail.
Yeah.
There is no taking away, and there is no doubt that Mike was a driving force and Dave Levin in the creation of KIP, and that they've done good for kids. He may have a price to pay now, and that's his to pay. But KIP, although devastated, I mean, it's grieving. It's a serious grief. But they communicated, and they were very proactive. And they, to my knowledge, they've lost 3 donors, and they will be able to make those up.
Yeah.
And they lost 4, and the 4th one came back and just said, I really appreciate this. I've given it some thought. And but it all, it's what your mom taught you. It's the golden rule, how you treat people, how you thank them. I used to tell my team at Texas Children's, we had a lot of small donations, and then we started getting some really big ones, but I said if we don't appreciate the $10 as much as the 10 million, we're in the wrong line of work, because you do not know when that $10 is going to lead you to something more. And even if it never does, if somebody has given that to you, they've honored your organization. It's up to us to honor them. So I think KIP has done a pretty extraordinary job of just keeping their eye on what they're meant to do.
And they will bounce back, right?
Yes,
They weren't
they
so
will.
dependent upon Mike.
Well,
that,
they're pretty dependent.
Yeah.
Which is, as a consultant,
well, in a sense, he was the biggest fundraiser, right? He was the biggest and best fundraiser,
yeah.
right?
When I came back to KIP as a consultant, I was like, man, this is no different. You guys need to branch out. He's not the only one who can, and they're following that, you know. But he's an extraordinary fundraiser.
Yeah. One of the things that we're studying right now is online giving and sort of the introduction of the internet in terms of part of development. From your perspective, is that going to take off? Is it going to change things? Has it changed things?
I think it probably already has, because I think there's a new generation of donors that prefer the ease and somewhat the anonymity of giving that way. So, and you know, again, when we started out, you were nice to talk about my experience without mentioning my age, but I'm at a stage where all that is really new and different, and but I think we have to pay attention to it, and I think it gives us another tool. I don't think there will ever be a replacement for good old-fashioned face-to-face communication, but those online donors can be your first introduction. And again, doing everything I say, thanking them appropriately, staying in touch with them, and they've given you an easy way to do that, because they've given online, and you've you know, they're trapped in your universe of donors. So I think there's a lot of potential. And then just some of the online, look at J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
I mean, those were, many of those were online gifts. I mean, in time of trouble, that's an easy place for people to go. I just think we probably need to monitor it and understand its value, and make sure that the tenets of a strong fundraising program apply to online giving
And they can,
as well.
right? I mean,
Exactly,
it's
they
all
can.
it's all part of that. Very good. So this is an interesting question. If you're developing an ideal development team, what does it look like? What sort of roles do they have?
I want people who can write. It's a lost art. But if you can write a thank you note, or you can write a proposal. And some of the things I saw come through the Brown Foundation were difficult to read.
Wow.
And I mean difficult to read because they were hard to read, and difficult to read because I'm a journalism major, and it was painful. So I look for, you know, I'm being very repetitive, but good communicators, people who are comfortable with people. I look for people who are comfortable with people that outrank them, whether in a, you know, comfortable with a CEO or perhaps have more money than they do. But I'm also looking for somebody who respects the teachers, the nurses, the doctors at the MS Society. I mean, people who really care about that. I'm looking for people who are team players, who again, I'm so proud of the team that I got to put together at Texas Children's. And when I was there, as we were launching a campaign, I got very sick, and I left for 3 months as we were launching a campaign, and they were a team, and they just stepped up, and they did. It was sort of gratifying when I got back, because I think they were beginning to think, we could use some leadership. We've done what we know how to do, but they helped each other. I think that's really important. I don't think you can be a really good fundraiser if you don't enjoy people.
Right.
So I look for that. I don't necessarily look for pure fundraising experience. It's great if you can find it, but I was having a conversation with someone today. There are a lot of open positions in our city, and we may or may not be able to fill them with seasoned fundraisers. So
But smart people with the relationship building capacity go a long way, don't they?
Yes. I look for people who are detail oriented. I want them to double check. I want them, there's nothing sort of like fingers on a chalkboard when a proposal comes to the Brown Foundation, but it was addressed to Fondren, or it, or they totally didn't pay attention to what was of interest to the Brown Foundation, or people who are creative in an organization. You go to a donor, well, figure out what it is in your organization that is a good fit, or figure out that there is no good fit, and don't waste your time.
What is the importance, and we've all seen this at certain nonprofit and their development team, what is the importance of polish, right? Because we have at some places, I had a physician once that said, oh yeah, everyone in development looks like they came from Town and Country magazine. But I've seen some extraordinary people that weren't super polished. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, but I will say that I told the people at KIP, that was a young crew, and I told them if they dressed the part that could earn them more respect. I didn't care about their style. I didn't care if somebody had a piercing. That didn't worry me. But if you dressed as a professional, I believe that you were treated as such. And that's just one more. That's just one more piece of your armor.
Right.
Information, kind of doing your homework, but also coming in with a level of confidence. You don't have to worry about, if you're gonna have a wardrobe malfunction.
So here is Charlotte Garner wants to know. She's heard many times that in the world of the nonprofits, schools and hospitals are the easiest to fundraise for. Do you agree with that?
Not necessarily, because I think people have a love of the arts, and again, you just have to find your donors. Certainly, schools that have alums, and so you have an affinity for that.
So universities probably, or private schools.
Absolutely, or private schools.
But KIP, you wouldn't necessarily pick a public school to be an easy thing to raise funds.
No, but it was just catalytic, something different to fix something that was broken. So,
it was exciting.
Yes, and and again, I think if you're passionate about what to do, some of the organizations that are most successful in fundraising in their arena is because they know their stuff, and they so there is some a sick child or someone who isn't touched by cancer, so there are a lot of people who are going to say, well, I'll give there, but I think people give.
Yeah. Reagan Morgan wants to know, if you want to expand your donor base, small nonprofit, medium nonprofit, you want to expand that donor base, what's the best strategy for that?
I think that, one, your board, just asking who people know, paying attention to what's happening in the city, and coming up with, there are all kinds of breakfasts. There are formulaic breakfasts where, people that are involved with your organization invite people, and there's an hour-long presentation, and then you're asked to give as you walk out the door. But I think it is kind of paying attention to people who might be interested in being willing to introduce them to your organization. As much as it pains me to say this, I think events, people like to party in this city, and so.
And you quickly expand your base with that.
Absolutely, because you capture that information.
Yeah.
I don't know that there are any magic. An online appeal, if you're able to sort of access lists and things like that, kind of does the work of an old-fashioned direct mail appeal where we used to buy lists and try to expand donors that way. That's expensive for an up-and-coming
We had someone
nonprofit.
mention that in the class, and that's sort of old-timey, isn't it?
Yeah. And you get so many of those in your mailbox that I think it has to be really, really well done for it to be effective.
So when you look at your career, and one of the big things that people often ask is work-life balance. And I have to say, so many people sitting in that chair, they just sort of laugh at that question of work-life balance. Is there such a thing, Katy?
Yes, it's hard. And one of the catalysts for me to leave KIP was that it was such a driven organization. And I got married, and I thought, I really love this person, and I see him on the weekends. This isn't good. So in that case, I sort of needed to make a decision about how that was going to work, because KIPP just at the time didn't have the resources for me to add a ton of people. But I also think there's a discipline. Are you working on what you need to be working on in the daytime hours, or are you doing some things that so then you're left at night to finish things up? I think there's that being a member of a team and asking for help. I think those are, and sort of defining what that looks like. And I will tell you, I've worked with some extraordinary people. One of the best is Bea Dixon, who's now at Cristo Rey.
Yeah.
And I hired Bea, and several months later she told me that she was pregnant, and I thought, well, yay. And are you going to take a week? What's that going to look like?
Yeah.
And first of all, she prepared for her maternity leave so that I knew everything that was on her plate. Second of all, when she came back, she said, when you come into my office at 5 o'clock, all you will see is my chair spinning, because I'm going home to my family. And I think she was able to do that because she was very disciplined.
Yeah.
She just,
So it's not easy, but it can be done.
No, it is doable, and more, I think our world allows for work-life balance.
Yeah.
It's kind of the trendy thing.
Yeah.
So, and if you're somewhere and you don't have it, and it's important to you, I just said there are lots of people lots of organizations looking for people. I mean, you need to find the right culture for you and your world.
Yeah.
But at Sterling, we have several young mothers who are doing a great job, and where Sterling right now is all women, but I think the same would be true for young men with families, that that would be part of our culture, and it is written into Sterling's values. We value work-life balance.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, here's the hardest question I'll be asked all night. Your favorite restaurant in Houston, Katy?
Okay, well, you know that I'm a Louisiana girl, so I would say Brennan's, just because it feels like home to me, and I do love a good Bloody Mary.
So, I go to lunch at Brennan's. I have a number of board members that's their favorite place for lunch, and I'm always amazed. They have those, is it 25-cent martinis?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Let's just quit talking about those. They do, and they're fabulous. But for little places, unfortunately, every Friday night you find, unfortunately, because it's probably not a great habit, but my husband and I are Cyclone and Ayahs. I mean, we just love good old-fashioned Tex-Mex.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's incredibly authentic, but it is really, really good.
It's good.
And we
It's
like
really
it.
good,
And it's
right?
our neighborhood Tex-Mex, so we really like that.
Yeah.
And I used to love Haven, but it went away. I mean, just
yeah.
places that are kind of Southern cooking,
Yeah.
I think is what I like.
Very
So
nice.
I do like to eat.
And then when they make the Katy Hayes story in Hollywood, who should be playing you, Katy?
Oh, Lord. Probably, although my parents are from the Midwest, we're from the Midwest, I think I spent my grown-up time in the South, so somebody like Renee Zellweger or Reese Witherspoon, I mean, just somebody with not afraid to speak her mind, but with a little bit of Southern graciousness in there,
There you go.
maybe.
Very good.
Oh.
Well, Katy, thank you for all that you do in our community, and thanks for being here as part of the class.
Well,
so
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Yeah,
My
yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys next time. Keep up the great work. Until then, we'll see you.